Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another Silicon Labs product podcast. I'm excited. Today we have Parker Dorris joining us again. Parker is the product manager for the Silicon Labs Wireless Express products, and there's been quite a bit of activity with those products over the last few years, and Parker's here to give us an update. There's been some really great new features added, and so Parker, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, no problem.
Before we jump into the questions, I think it's probably appropriate, maybe if you can give the listeners just a introduction to Wireless Express and what's great about it.
Sure. Okay. So we launched Wireless Express with the BGX13, this Bluetooth Express product last September, about a year ago, and it was designed to be our easiest to use BLE5 offering. It's a zero programming solution, so it kind of complements our programmable modules and SoCs by having a pre-programmed module that it acts as a wireless cable replacement. So it can communicate with other Bluetooth Express modules and can also, of course, communicate with smartphones over Bluetooth 5 connection. And as we designed this product, we tried to make sure we could address sort of all of the challenge points that we've seen over years of supporting customers through their Bluetooth applications. So of course we wrote the firmware, we pre-programmed the firmware, but we also are using these modules that are pre-certified, that have integrated antenna to try to make the hardware design aspect as easy as possible. And we put a lot of work into developing open source Express framework libraries for both Android and iOS to simplify the process of adding BLE connectivity to mobile apps for those mobile operating systems. And so we try to just make it as easy as possible to go from initial evaluation to product release for our customers with Bluetooth Express. And in this year that we've released it, we've gone through a number of minor firmware updates and 2 major firmware updates that have added additional features and added other things based on field feedback, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, well, great. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from the sales team and from people talking to me about the product. Can you maybe share a unique example of how a customer has taken advantage of the features you just talked about, that ease of use, quick to market, lack of needing to program? Share a unique product example that you may have run into.
Sure. Okay. Well, one thing that's kind of obvious when you're looking at the various opportunities on Salesforce is that the theme that emerges is that we found a lot of customers, sometimes with customers that are designing products that might be top of the line. They have some area of expertise that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Bluetooth, but they want to add Bluetooth connectivity to their product. One example of this was a company that was designing actually an oxygen mask for use for actual physical activity, and they wanted to add a Bluetooth interface to have like a phone app to control the rate of a release of oxygen through the system. And this is a smaller company that didn't necessarily have a full team to embark on a massive Bluetooth development, and they were able to use Bluetooth Express as sort of a drop-in solution to create this interface, and it worked really well for them. And we kind of see that story playing out again and again with customers that are potentially a little intimidated at the prospect of having to start from scratch to develop a Bluetooth link, and Bluetooth Express fits really well into their needs.
All right, well, that's definitely unique. I've seen those oxygen masks on some people in the gym, and they look intimidating. So I'm sure if there's a way to add Bluetooth connectivity to it, it probably even makes it more interesting. So, well, now back to the questions that I've gathered for the new features on the BGX. When I first worked with you on the release of Bluetooth Express, I thought that it was, it would have been great if there were some more GPIO or peripheral interfaces I could work with that first product. And it looks like you've updated that. it in the past it allowed me to configure the inputs and the outputs, but I didn't have like a serial bus, and I think that's one of the recent releases. Can you talk to us about why you added the serial bus, maybe what the capability the user will now have having a serial bus on a zero programming device, what they can do with that?
Yeah, so with firmware release 1.2, which is going to be available, should be available on DMS for OTA updates by the time this podcast releases. All the new features we added in were based on field feedback, and really almost all of them center in one way or another on I/O. One of the key things we've added in is an I2C master interface. It basically allows you to create a BLE to I2C master link. And there's a couple of APIs that you can execute over the air that give you the ability to do read and write transactions across an I2C interface. It's a particularly powerful new feature because it really enables a whole other type of use case with Bluetooth Express, where an embedded host, an MCU on the embedded side, isn't really required. You could create a sort of a sensor hub design with just Bluetooth Express and the I2C lines, connected to one or more slave sensors, and basically develop a product without having to write any code on the embedded side at all. In addition to that I2C master interface, we've also added we had an event notification system that was in a pretty primitive state with the previous Bluetooth Express release, and we've added a lot of features to it. So now you can have basically events triggered with GPIO level transitions, and also even with button presses, checking for long and short button presses. And you can trigger actions on Bluetooth Express, such as sending a string across the BLE link whenever one of those events is detected. So that enables you to design. Let's say, for instance, you could create a remote control that has a number of mechanical buttons, and every button is configured to automatically send a message across a connected, BLE link that says, button 1 pressed, what button 1 released, button 2 pressed, button 2 released. A way to, and there are lots of ways to sort of mix and match these features. There's actually a demo that we've created to exercise these new features that combines the I2C master with GPIO monitoring using one of our Silicon Labs sensors. So there's an interrupt pin that would come out of a contact sensor that can toggle low when something is in proximity. We've tied a GPIO kind of event monitoring mechanism to that pin, and there's also an I2C master interface that allows you to configure different characteristics of the sensor. And so those two features we've added in that are very much centered on enabling more use cases that need different kinds of I/O other than what we already offered. And a related feature that we've added in is something we're calling Express Connect. Express Connect is basically a way of establishing a link between two Bluetooth Express products or a Bluetooth Express product and a phone, where you don't have to have as much, or in fact any, embedded host interaction. So you can configure a device to effectively connect across a Bluetooth link with a button press. So it's kind of the classic cable replacement idea where you have two endpoints and you press a button to turn the two endpoints on, and they sort of automatically connect to each other. So that's what we've created with this Express Connect system. And of course, these are new commands that we've added into the command interface, but they can be executed through event monitoring and the system that we've added. So if it detects a short button press or a long button press, then it can execute an advertise or a connection sequence to sort of autonomously connect without any kind of embedded host initiating the connection. So again, it creates a system by which the amount of code that you have to write on the embedded host side is greatly reduced, and the complexity of the sort of interface between the embedded host and the Bluetooth Express is reduced even to be simplified even further than it was at initial launch.
Okay. Well, thanks for that additional information on all those new features for the peripherals in the GPIO. That's great. And that Express Connect should be useful for a lot of customers to take advantage of. So for my last question, I wanted to ask you, really pull in a question that we heard from a lot of customers. We've had some workshops globally giving people exposure to the Bluetooth Express product. We've been getting a lot of positive input, but one of the questions that seemed to come up the most was the throughput of the devices. And I saw in the release notes that that was also addressed, that you increased the throughput. Can you talk about that final improvement of the software release?
Yes. So one of the before this latest firmware release, we could get throughput rates that were reasonably close to the theoretical maximum of Bluetooth 5 for unacknowledged data transfers. But we know that, and we got feedback saying that some customers needed, the sort of reliability that comes from using acknowledged data transfers. So we've built in a feature we call Fast ACK, and it's supported both in the BGX to BGX communication use case, and it's supported in the BGX to phone use case using our mobile framework. But the feature basically creates a channel within the communications channel that enables us to do acknowledged data transfers at close to the theoretical maximum Bluetooth 5 transfer speed. And so we're pretty much at the upper limit of what we can do with Bluetooth 5 2 meg-PHY transfers at this point. And the throughput, this new feature will be available with 1.2, and then I believe about a week after, maybe the first or second week in October, we should have the new throughput numbers published on docs.scilabs.com for people to review. But it's a substantial improvement in speed. I think it's, I believe it's an 8x improvement in throughput speeds for acknowledged data transfer.
That's great. I was going to be my next follow-up question was if you're going to update the documentation. So that's perfect. And I just wanted to end the podcast, Parker. Is there anything that you want to share with the listeners? I know they appreciate all the information you share, but is there something that maybe we left out that you want to end the podcast with?
Well, so I mentioned this docs.scilabs.com update to include throughput figures. There will also be 2 new application example pages that are created on docs.scilabs.com in the Bluetooth Express space that exercise and demonstrate Express Connect, I2C master control, and GPIO monitoring, all of the new features we've talked about during this podcast. So I encourage everybody to go to docs.scilabs.com's Bluetooth Express space and see those new demos. And then I mentioned this already, but we've updated the Express mobile framework to support this new Fast ACK feature. The source code for the Express framework for iOS and Android will be available on GitHub in the first or second week of October. And the 2 apps we have on the Google Play and iOS App Store will be updated as well to support Fast ACK and to they also include a few other improvements and refinements. But I just want to make sure that people make sure to update their apps, and you can use the app to update Bluetooth Express EXP board, the expansion board that we have, to the latest firmware, and then test out all these new features.
Well, thanks again, Parker. And thanks to our listeners and for everyone for tuning in to another podcast. Be sure to visit docs.scilabs.com that Parker just mentioned, and or visit the wireless section of the scilabs.com website for more information. Until next time, thanks everyone.